Welcome. I see participant numbers kicking up. I'm about to introduce you to an activity you see on the screen. I'm just going to give it another minute. All right, we opened up early because there's a warm-up that you can do as you're waiting. And thank you for the highs in the chat, and feel free to continue to introduce yourselves. I'm going to add something else to what we can be chatting about, and it's this activity. So which shape doesn't belong is part of which one doesn't belong, a resource that I'll share with you a little bit later. And the idea is to just choose a shape and explain why it does not belong with the others. And there is a reason why each one of them does not belong with the others. So let's use the chat to describe which shape you're talking about and your reason why it doesn't belong with the others. And I saw a mention of correctional ed, so I'll say this again when everybody's on, but the resources can all be downloaded and used without the internet, the resources that I will share today. All right, the pentagon. Why does the pentagon not belong with the others? One shaded and five-sided. I've got to keep up fast with this chat. All right, that pentagon got a lot of attention. I saw that several times. This one doesn't belong because it is shaded. This one because it does not have a flat bottom. The rectangle because not all sides are equal. Yes, let's list as many reasons as possible for all of these. So we've got one reason for everything so far, but let's keep going. And I'm just going to restate the directions because I already took them off the screen as we got started. This is called Which One Doesn't Belong? We're doing with shapes right now. And the idea is to explain why each shape does not belong with the others. And there are multiple reasons for each one of the shapes. So it seems to be pretty common that we notice things about sides before we notice things about angles. That was the case in my class, and I've seen that with teachers too. Sometimes students don't know the term right angles, and we might hear them use the term corner. So welcome to everybody just joining us. Yes, it is before 2. We had plenty of people already joining, so we got started with a warm-up. And I just want to repeat those directions if you're just coming on. So this is called Which One Doesn't Belong? So we're looking at 4 different shapes, and the task is to explain why each shape does not belong with the others. And you can see that we've already listed some reasons here on the screen. So my question to you is, what else? We've only got one reason here for the top right shape. Any other reasons why this does not belong with the others? I've tried to keep up with your reasons, but if I missed something that's not on the screen now, go ahead and add it to the chat again, please. I see a question about using the chat. You have a drop-down menu of everyone, and the choices, actually, I think it might be set to something else when you come in. So where it says 2, there's a little arrow facing down under that. Click on that and you'll see your other choices. All right, thank you for your contributions. Feel free to keep introducing yourself. Oh, rectangle, here's another one I just caught. So talking about the height of it, the height of the rectangle, it's not as high as the other shapes. Okay. Back on. All right, so we started off with an activity called Which One Doesn't Belong? And I know some of you are just joining us. We will have an opportunity to participate in another one of these later. This was as our warm-up. This is how I have one semester, I greeted my students with, this is our numeracy routine every morning. And I'm going to talk a little bit about how that worked, why I chose it. Just a little bit about that particular class. I had a class then of, was it all English language learners? That would just be a coincidence. I think I might have had one English speaking student in class then. Actually, yes, she was with me then. But my class was mostly English language learners, even though they were with me for math. I know I caught the attention of the ESOL teachers in my program who came and learned about this activity and decided to use it in their classes too. I know it works well for ESOL classes. And the sources that I'm going to be sharing would work at the high school equivalency level, so GD, HiSET, task prep. But the examples that I'm choosing to use with you now are at the numeracy level. But you can find which one doesn't belong activities that are college level. So there's a whole bunch of choices for what can work with your class, and I'll just comment on how you could make them yourself. I'm going to be moving through fairly quickly, and I am going to, at 3 o'clock Eastern time when we end, so an hour from now, I'm going to stay on and answer questions if you have them, because we still have a line. And I'm going to be moving faster than I move through it during my classes, but it will give you a taste of the activities and an experience of what that's like as a learner. Something else I want to point out, this is probably of interest to if you're in corrections or maybe in a church basement kind of setting, which I literally have my class in a church basement, and technology isn't always reliable. So I want to point out that all of these can be downloaded from the web before class, and you don't need to rely on the internet for them to work. One of the sources has videos, and if your internet is not reliable, I do recommend downloading them first so it'll play smoothly during class. So obviously you would need technology to be able to play the videos, but you don't need it to have a good internet connection to work them. And anytime there's a video at that source, there's also an image, and so you could use that as well. These can be just printed if you don't have a way to project them. So there's lots of ways to make it work. What you just saw as the warm-up, I did as a projection from a projector onto a whiteboard, and students wrote right up there. So I forgot to introduce myself. I'm Connie Rivera, and I do my math contracting through Turk. And we have the Adult Numeracy Center where we offer all kinds of sessions like this one and others. And you'll see my contact information at the end, so you can find out more if your state wants other offerings. All right. You may not have been here for the warm-up, but I just want to touch base about a little bit of what could you get out of the activity that we started off with. Turk is an organization in Massachusetts that goes now by the acronym rather than what it used to stand for. And it's a math center, publishes books like the Empower books and offers trainings and a lot of research. The R does stand for research. Thanks for your question. So my question to you now is, what can you get out of experiencing an activity like this? What did you notice if you were here before 2 o'clock and you participated? And again, we'll have another opportunity to participate. What can you get out of an activity like that? Higher level thinking skills, competition. Can I find something that somebody else didn't come up with? The fact that there are several sets of outcomes, so there's more than one right answer. That's very helpful. Open-ended is another way to say that. The mathematical language. Yes, build the math vocabulary, recognize what those shapes are. Different answers from different levels. That's what makes it a really good formative assessment. So I am going to just go back a little bit to your answers, and yes, less scary. So that you can see these again, and you'll get slides afterwards, and the slides have, I'm sending it after the session, so you'll have your answers. So as you were talking, I was making sure, making sure to record all of your answers. So you'll look back now and realize that there's some things that sound very similar, but I put up everybody's answers if I could catch it. The chat was moving fast. So we might see something like that it has 5 sides and that it does not have 4 sides. And that might feel like the same thing, but it didn't to the person that was saying it. And so I think it's important to record different ways of saying something. I'm also noticing what kind of vocabulary are students using when they're doing this. To use your examples as your answers as an example, I see that somebody in class is familiar with the word parallelogram. Somebody knows the word pentagon. I see things that are a little bit less mathy sounding, which is definitely what I hear in class. And then sometimes if it's the direction I'm going with the activity we're going to do afterwards, I'll tell them what the formal vocabulary word is for something. Something like not all the sides are the same. You know, what would it mean if for all sides to be the same, and just draw out, do students know the word equal? That could be a possible example. So I use this before an activity where I want students to know the vocabulary ahead of time. And in this case, we were actually going to go on to talk about angles. But as you see, most answers aren't about angles. We got one answer about angles on the bottom right. Here's another mathy word that just caught my eye in the chat. The rectangle is not a regular polygon. So 2 mathy words we haven't had yet. So those are some of the things that I can gather from doing this activity. So as you've noticed, it took a while, and in fact, in my class, it took longer than it did for us just now. And so I want to make sure that that you know why I would be advocating for us spending time on something that doesn't feel like it's an efficient use of time. I could just tell them the vocabulary of this is called a side, this is called an angle, this is a polygon, and I could say all of those things. But I want my students to, I want my class to be more student-led than that, but I also want my students to be comfortable with multiple correct answers, of identifying little differences, and all kinds of other things, some of which you already mentioned in the chat. So I'm going to share with you some research and ask for a prediction. And it's research from PIAC, which is the Program for the International Assessment of Adult Competencies. So this is across countries. And I want to just tell you a definition of something you're going to look at first. So they're going to describe students being at or below level 1. And I want to make sure that you know what that means before we look at it. So at level 1, an adult, and so this is not necessarily our students, but a whole big wide range of adults in each country, can add, subtract, multiply, and divide, perform basic one-step mathematical operations if they're given the values. And an example that Piak gives is that if you can just see one level of soda bottles, can you predict if there are actually 2 levels, what's there? And the students that are at or below level 1 are considered at risk for difficulties with numeracy. If a student is below level 1, then they may be considered functionally innumerate. So I want you to keep that in mind, and I want to ask you for a prediction. I'm going to show you some results of the research, and I want you to predict something for yourself, and feel free to share it in the chat if you would like to. I'm asking for a prediction about where you think the literacy and the numeracy skills stand in your state and or nationwide. So you could be thinking about 4 different sets of data. They're all going to be percentages. So I'm going to show you a quick look at literacy and the percent of students that are at or below level 1, and of numeracy, the percent of students that are at or below level 1. And the data is collected by county, actually. So you can make a prediction for your state, and you can make a prediction for the country. So make for yourself, and share it in the chat if you want to, a prediction about the percentage of adults in your state who you think are going to be at or below level 1 in literacy and at or below level 1 in numeracy. And here on the slide, you have the definition of what it is for numeracy. While you make predictions, I'm going to bring up a map. You can follow along after you've made your prediction. You can follow along to that map if you would like to. Oops. That will go in the chat, the location. All right, so we have a really wide range of percentages coming up. So if you'd like to follow, I'm going to drop that in the chat again. If you'd like to follow me to the map and follow along and find your own state, you can. And I know I saw New Jersey go by. Here's an example. This is for literacy right now. The blue is for literacy. So at or below level 1, 21% in the state, 22% in the nation. I also saw New York earlier. Oh, I found it. I know I saw Nebraska, but I didn't want to say it out loud until I was sure of which state that was. Yes, I will put the map link in the chat again. It's flying by with everybody giving predictions. So on this map, I can change it to, and this will be on your slides. If you don't want to follow me right now, that's fine. You'll have access to this after the session. You can change it between literacy and numeracy. If you want to go to the county level, that's one of the tabs here at the top. And I can't possibly keep up with giving everybody's data for literacy and numeracy, but I can point out that nationwide, at or below level 1 in literacy is 22%. And nationwide in numeracy, at or below level 1 is 32%. So I wonder if you're happy with your prediction. I'm asking this, and for your reactions, I would normally wait longer when I ask students a question like this, but I'm just telling you why I'm asking it. I think it's important to point out to students that estimates and predictions only get better with experience. And if you had nothing on which to base this, then there's no reason why you should be very accurate, as in like really close to the number. And you could have had an accurate prediction, but not be happy that that's the prediction. That makes a lot of sense in this circumstance, because even if we say, oh, 32%, that's less than half, what we're saying is that about a third of students are at or below level 1, which we already said was at risk for innumeracy. Another thing that I can do is, if I'm looking at specific data with students, is zero in on something and ask for an explanation. Like if your state is doing relatively well, is your state percent higher or lower than the nation figure? Because that's the thing that students will get backwards, because we're drawn to think that a higher number is better. But since what we're measuring is at or below level 1, we don't want the higher number. But that's a thing for students to work through. Yes, thank you. And think about. Tracy, can you ask that again at the end, please? I don't want to lose that, but I definitely can't keep it in my head right now. Okay, so back to our slides. And that's not the one I want to bring up. I wanted this. All right, so something that I intended to do as we're going through there is to capitalize on your natural curiosity. This is already bringing out thoughts that you're offering about why could this be, and questions. So in order to start capitalizing on curiosity, I asked for predictions. I asked you to think ahead of time, what would it be for your state? And that ties you into looking at the results. I would do the same thing with students, although this is not necessarily data I'd be using with students, but with anything that we're looking at. I also asked for an analysis. I kind of just gave you the answers there, but we were thinking about how does your state compare to the United States as a whole? And in summary, ways that I can capitalize on students' curiosity when they express curiosity about something. I can mirror the question that they've asked. So if they said, how far is that? Then I'd be like, how far is that? And I can also respond by just saying, what do you think? So to bring that together, basically, I want to not be saying something that I can have a student say. That's part of developing students' language, but also their thinking. So the data has students who are not in class also. It was not run through adult education programs. That's data that they gathered in another way. I don't remember the answer about exactly how that was gathered. All right, we are going to look at another, I guess I just wanted to say one thing before we got to this, which one doesn't belong. I think it's something that happens too often, that programs are thinking students have to be at an advanced level of ESOL before they can have math class. They need the vocabulary first. And I want to point out that they can build vocabulary in class. This class had students that were at the intermediate level with ESOL in class with advanced speakers and the one native English speaker. And we were still working on numeracy skills. So it's not a thing to wait for till after language development is done. It's something to be done in conjunction. I've seen some of Brene Brown's things about trust that I thought were interesting. Thank you for sharing that, Joanne. All right, so we're going to do this. Which one doesn't belong? I am interested to know which one of these does not belong with the others. So let's put in the chat, and I'm going to bring up the way to edit this. Getting there. Let's put in the chat which one doesn't belong with the other. T is tails up. Yeah. Those were just placeholders for me to be able to type and find my text box. Why does D not belong with the others? Let's hear your reasons that go with it. Does not equal the other amounts. And the criteria is up to you. I'm definitely going to miss something, but I'm going to keep going here. Copper, brown, 1 coin. This is 50 cents. Only want the tails of the largest amount. Doesn't equal 25 cents. Buildings, instead of faces. Yes, the idea is that any of the items can be selected depending on the criteria you are deciding what the criteria are. So I did this with a group of teachers once that knew way more about history than I do and told me all about like years that these coins were minted and the something about the president and separated out by that. So that told me something about that particular group of students or class, so to speak. So some people have used color. Some people have used the arrangement, like this is an array. And then others are set up as an array. That Lincoln is facing the other way. It's 1 coin and it's the largest. I was using array in the very mathy sense of like rows and columns. Not showing a precedent. So there is no reason why this has to be all mathy words and mathy terms, because there's other things that you can learn from thinking about one set and how does that exclude other things if you name that set this one thing. There's other things that can be learned from paying total attention to the detail and noticing the smallest little characteristic. That's great for graph reading. So I'm going to go back to displaying this. So I know I didn't capture everything you had going on in the chat, but thank you for all of your ideas. This is really almost an infinite activity of what students could say. And that's one of the things that I appreciate about it. I mentioned to you that you could set one up as in do it yourself. So if you have a lesson coming up and you want to make sure students have the vocabulary for it, then you can create just 4 blocks. And once they're in the routine, then they know how it works and think about selecting something where they've got something in common with the other things, but not everything. Here's an example. I actually use this for teaching writing, and I use it to build the vocabulary for something to do with snow before we wrote. I don't remember exactly what the writing activity was, but it gave me an opportunity to know what students know. And I had several students in class that had never seen snow yet, and we're in Connecticut. It was bound to snow. So it also can tell you things that are unexpected. If you look at the little writing in the bottom left of the top left figure, where there's the feet in the mouth, it says, "That's a joke, son." There's no comma. And a student was describing something and writing on the board, and he said about Jackson. And I was like, oh, you gave the snowman or the boy a name. And he's like, no, it says it right there. And I realized that without hearing the phrase, that's a joke, son, he interpreted it as Jackson. And yes, there absolutely is a website for this. And it's just called Which One Doesn't Belong to, so .ca right here. And I have it on a slide at the end, and you will get the slides for this session. So I have been using the phrase numeracy routine, but I have not explained what I mean by that. So I'm going to do that now. It is something that, sorry about that. It is something that is happening regularly in class. So I'm glad you like the free resources. Yes, me too. It's something that I did at the beginning of every class. So what was helpful to me was that my students were very interested in spending a long time on the activity, because Which One Doesn't Belong suggests 10 minutes, but I actually had it open for half an hour at the beginning of every class. So my class started at 8:30 a.m., but I had quite a few parents who needed to make sure that their kids were at school. And I had one crossing guard in class who could not leave until the kids were at school. And so students were arriving between 8:30 and 9 every day. And by 9 o'clock, everybody was there and we'd be ready to begin class. But I also found that it was something that they were getting to class as fast as possible for, so that they could contribute. So there was no like impatience with, oh, this again, because they were using it as like a competition maybe, but like in a I want to be challenged kind of way. The students had access to the markers. The students who were in intermediate they were the two students that never got up the confidence to be the ones writing, that they would tell somebody else what to write. But the markers started off in my hand and I would write, but then as time went on and everybody got comfortable and understood the routine, the students were doing the writing and I wasn't writing any of it. And sometimes it wasn't students writing their own idea, but one of their classmates' ideas. Something else that's important is that it's oral. And that doesn't mean you can't capture it afterwards. I had students taking pictures of the result in the end, because there was a vocabulary word that they learned and they wanted to remember, and they just wanted to be able to reference it as if it was their notes. But the writing that's done is the writing on the board, or however you're collecting it. But it's not meant to be like everybody gets their own copy of this and then they end up looking down and spending their time not as part of the community. So that's what I mean by oral here. And what I love about it already came up. There are no presumed correct answers. What's the criteria? They decide. Whatever they observe is the criteria. My question to you now is, coming up, why have a numeracy routine? What can you see as a reason to go ahead and have a routine like this, either as a warm-up in your class or happening regularly, that students get used to what the routine is, but not like the problem is different every time. Building community, a deeper level of thinking, preparation for the lesson that's coming up. Yes, yes, yes. Routines create comfort. I like that. Yes, it also is really helpful when language is an issue overall. It's a different kind of problem rather than just doing exercise after exercise. Communication, it connects to real life, builds their confidence, builds their vocabulary. It's non-threatening. It sets the tone for learning. It gives structure to the class. So I want to point out, I was using this in a math class, but you can use it in any class. And I'm going to share some ideas that I have. You've already said some of these. A predictable learning experience. They don't have to worry so much about everything being new, and it frees their mind up to think about the content of the activity. It helps them develop math thinking habits. You already mentioned deep thinking. It helps them develop a habit of reasoning and explaining. They learn from that others are thinking differently than they are. And I sometimes learn that there's something there that I didn't see because my students notice it. Warm up their brain, their thinking machine. It also develops a habit of sense making. You already mentioned build community. It also builds number sense. And you also already mentioned their comfort level and that it's non-threatening. It helps lower anxiety about math class in general. I can be using it as an ongoing assessment. And students learn to trust themselves. I'm going to point out, I'm coming from the math perspective. I'm going to point out that there are 8 standards for mathematical practice, but which one doesn't belong in another routine we'll look at really get at these 2 quite a bit. So math practice 6, attend to precision, where students are learning to communicate precisely with others and use clear definitions in their discussion. So they're getting that vocabulary to be able to do that and give explanations to each other. So in spite of the fact that I said the 2 intermediate speakers didn't feel comfortable writing on the board, they still had to get that idea across to another student to get that person to write on the board. So it was still happening. Yes, there's no waiting time at all. We get started right away. Good addition. And then math practice 3 is about students making conjectures, justifying their conclusions, etc. And we are about to dive into another activity where we will do even more with this math practice. So I'm going to be asking you a question. The question is going to be based on a picture I'm going to show you. And ultimately what I want to answer is, what do you think about how many packets of ketchup will fill this container? That's not what we're going to do with it first. We're going to build up to that. But I wanted you to know what the question would be. So remember, I'm not looking for an answer yet. What we're going to look at first, here's the picture. What we're going to look at first is the visual elements that are critical for making an estimate. So I'm going to go out to the editing and we're going to fill in both sides of this list here. One more. Okay, so I'm interested first in the critical side. What elements that are visual elements in this picture right here of a ketchup packet and a container, what visual elements will be critical to making your estimate? The volume of the cup. Oops. Where's my lost the bullet points? More space then. I agree that experience is a part of it. It's not one of the visual items, but that absolutely comes into play here. If you've never opened a ketchup packet, you don't really know what size you're looking at. Is that the size of a pillow? Break it down a little bit about, like, if I just told you the volume, that would be a kind of boring. So what if I could tell you another part of it? What information would you want to be able to figure out how much it will hold? Knowing the word estimate. Thank you for bringing that up, Linda. It is actually ketchup. Knowing some things like, is it solid or liquid or something in between? That wasn't very sciencey of me. I saw one come by earlier, but it wasn't in that column about. Oh, sometimes I lose sight of where the cursor is. There we go. The color is not critical. So let's switch over. Let's switch over to the not critical side. And yes, you can open that cup up. You peel back the rim and then spread it out. Lots of good TikTok videos or something I heard about from somebody. I didn't watch it myself. So the color, the paper or plastic. Smell. I like it. I haven't heard that one before. Texture. Taste. Oh, well, taste would be not visual, but flow of ketchup. Cool. I'm sure I missed them. I'm going to stop right there because we get the idea. We could keep going with this. How much you squeeze out of it, that's going to matter for sure. All right, so we've thought about what we should be paying close attention to. And this was not an activity just to do with teachers. The brand of ketchup that belongs on our list of not critical, thank you. This was an activity that I would do with students also. We're zeroing in on what's important and maybe getting a couple of our questions answered, like what does estimate mean? So now I would like to hear from you an estimate that is too low to be the number of packets. Like you look at that container and you are sure that if you open up that packet and squeeze it into that container, it is definitely going to fit at least, I see 3 and 2 and 1. It's going to be at least that number of packets. Lots of 1s and 2s and 3s. Definitely going to be more than 3. Up, we have a 4. More 2s and 1s. A 20. A 4. A couple more 4s. 2/10 of a packet. All right, so we're still estimating what's going to be too low to be the number of packets. So we're establishing a range. I saw that 1 is the lowest low that we heard. And now we're going to switch over and I'm going to ask you, give an estimate that is too high to be the number of ketchup packets that will fit in that container. 50, 25, 1,000, 100. This one is going by really fast. 8, 5. All right, I think 5 was the lowest I saw. 102,000 might have been the highest I saw. So you have your own personal range. We have some kind of class range that's between 1 and 102,000. And we're going to switch now to go ahead and find out what the actual answer is. Here's where I want to point out, I mentioned that you would be able to download videos. I'm not going to play the video in the session, but you'll see right above the arrow that that was an option. Those will link to the website itself, but if you click out to Vimeo, you can go to the spot right underneath the Vimeo video on the right, and there's a download option. And you can download it in all different qualities depending on how much space you have. So it's an option to play this video. Then you can spy on exactly how much they're squeezing out of each packet, but I'll tell you ahead of time that he's thorough when he does that. So now I'm about to reveal, are we estimating the packets or the contents of the packets? You know, the wording of the question wasn't very clear, Mary, and it is the contents of the packets itself. And nobody's asked me that either, but good catch. I don't think that was as clear as it could have been. Here we go. 6 ketchup packets fit. Now, I did already see a question about how full is full, but there are probably some people reacting right now of, hey, that's over full, not full. Here's another opportunity for me to talk to students about if they're happy with their estimate or not. And one thing that I really like about the sets of things to estimate from at Estimation 180 is that they come in not just one like this series, but there'll be quite a few different containers and different catch-up ones. Because when you are never having any experience with catch-up, then how could you possibly get a good estimate? So this gives you a chance to interact with it and then use that to make a better estimate later. And I think that's really important to get that idea across to students, that your estimates seem wild to somebody with experience in the beginning until you learn more about something. And then the idea is just to refine your estimate and get better at it. I had a student who worked in a fulfillment warehouse. We were doing some things with numerosity, this idea of like how many things are in something, and he was incredible at it. And I didn't realize what he did at work. I just knew he worked third shift and came in with a big cup of Dunkin' Donuts coffee. And he was like incredible. Like he knew how many envelopes were in a box, how many paper clips were sitting there, how many somethings were in a jar. And it's because every night at work, he was spending time estimating, so he'd know how many to grab off the shelf, because then he had to count them out and send them in different boxes, different places. So he had really refined that skill because he spent more time with it. So I sometimes tell my students about that, because I don't want to give the impression that there's a really bad estimate, because estimation is based on your previous experience. So if you use this, you might want to change the question, because there are some observations that the question was not as clear as it could be. So catch up with that in the chat if you haven't seen it yet. All right. So at estimation 180, you can find sets of things. I want to point out that at first I went on there, and the beginning questions are a lot of like pictures of a guy, and it just looks like I don't want this to sound rude, but like white California money. Like I was like, how does this fit with like no trees look that way near me? And then I found out afterwards that he is the teacher, and he was using this for his class when he started this website, and they're in California. So it just fit in for him to use a picture of him, standing next to his wife, and some things you can estimate height with. But there are also lots of sets of information there that you can find that are pictures. I've enjoyed using the toilet paper one. There's a series about toilet paper. And you also could make your own of this series as well. Of course, it's very handy that there's so many ideas out there for you already. The 180 came from the fact that it was originally the 180 days of school. Here are some questions that you could ask while you're working on estimations with your students. And I would like to talk about what kinds of math topics that you might choose if you are not primarily a math teacher, because we can integrate math with all kinds of other subjects, but people's perceptions of what it means to be doing math are typically narrow, and they look like workbook pages and calculations. But that's not what it means to be doing math. Calculations are used for getting to something else, not as the end in itself. So I think that if you're not the math teacher, there's no reason to spend time teaching students the ways to calculate. There are times that an English language learner will be curious about the American way, but there is no need for them to learn a new way to calculate if theirs is reliable. So it may be that they want to understand what their children are doing, and it's it doesn't make a good class lesson, but of course there are some times to share how those look with the American algorithms. But what I would choose for a math topic in a class that wasn't primarily a math class, so ESOL class or even another subject, is anything that has to do with reasoning and logic. I think reasoning with fractions and decimals is important because, especially if you're talking about ESOL class, because we just use them fractions so much more than in other countries. So that can help them make connections to other things that they are more familiar with. Geometric thinking and spatial awareness. Proportional reasoning, so which thing is a better deal? So I'm not talking about setting up a formal proportion, but the idea of scale and that kind of thing. These two in particular, the geometric thinking and the proportional reasoning, were a part of some research about what's needed at the broadest range of jobs, and it was these two. And I think it's kind of rare for us to spend a lot of time on spatial awareness and geometric thinking. So that's a topic to consider. And then just anything that has more than one correct answer would be a good way to go, because that sort of levels the playing field. If your class was selected for people's language abilities, you'll probably find something similar to what I've had before, which is I have a student with a 3rd grade formal education in the same class with a student who had a master's degree from another country. And so the experience with formal problems is so broad, I don't want to set up a class where that experience is what makes other people feel behind when everybody can still learn something more about math. Connecting to graphs. Graphs could go on that list also, because that's a huge way to be a savvy consumer, to really understand how to look at data. So I mentioned the 2 resources here. I'm going to just mention another one in the chat right now. Not thinking of the actual website right now, but if you are a math teacher, search for Would You Rather Math. This is another routine that you could use that it offers 2 different choices, and you just have to justify your reason to choose one or the other with math. And it can cause some really good discussions to happen in class. It's an activity that I've paired students for. They get to make their own decision, but they pair up with somebody to talk about both sides of the 2 options. So it's things like your height. Would you rather have your height in quarters, a stack of quarters up to your height, or would you rather have a certain dollar value? And then obviously you're going to make that decision based on how tall you are. So it gives everybody a chance to think about some math at their own level, bringing in a lot of different skills to make their determination, but doesn't say what kind of math you have to use. So the 2 websites that we used are here on the resources page, and then there's just a blog that you may be interested in reading. And this will be in the slides that I share later. Those should be available, I think, by tomorrow. And then this is my contact information and the information for our center. I mentioned the Adult Numeracy Center at Turk, and we have lots of sessions. This is just one of them. Lots of presenters. I am just one of them. And if you're familiar with the Empower book, sometimes people associate Turk with the Empower, and I'll type that in too. Math books. And I am a member of the Adult Numeracy Network, ANN for short. And there's going to be a session during the pre-conference session. This is the information for the full day session, which is face-to-face, but there's also going to be a half-day virtual session. And you can attend a pre-conference session without attending all of the COABE conference. So if this is more affordable for you, please consider joining us for this. Sorry, I see I have a font issue here with the size. And you can check out the website for, I remember seeing interest in free resources. There are free resources here at the Adult Numeracy Network.org site. Thank you, Peg. A little cheering going on there. So this is my last slide. I'm going to stop sharing. I'm going to just go back to this briefly in case you wanted to write anything down, but these slides will be available to you. And I wanted to give you a chance to ask questions. And I think there might be some follow-up thoughts from COABE before the questions. And I see a Q&A over here. Oh, we answered that one. I see that Robert has his hands raised. I don't know how to, do you have the ability to unmute yourself? If not, we can try okay. We can try the chat too. A certificate for the webinar coming emailed. I do not know the answer to that. Speaking of whether there is a difference between an overlap and presentation. I believe that the presentation that's virtual and the, presentation between the ANN conference and the COIB conference. Okay, so the folks that put together the Adult Numeracy Network conference are attending and giving sessions, but what they're giving at the pre-conference is not the same thing that they are using for their sessions if they have a session being offered at COIB. Andrew, if that's not what you meant for me to answer, could you just follow up, please? The technology that I was using to type on slides while I was presenting was PowerPoint. So I have two screens, and I was looking at the presenter notes on the screen that's facing my camera. My second slide was where the presentation went, and behind the presentation, I put the editable slides. So then I just switched back and forth from my tray at the bottom to be able to do that. In class, I bring up, I only have a Chromebook, so it's in Google Slides, and actually I stuck it on a Google Doc. It wasn't even in slides. And then I just project it on the board and students right up there. You can do something else if you want them to annotate using Zoom. It all depends on how you're meeting with your students. Oh, thank you for sharing that. ESL and math together is new for you. I'm hoping that this will help you see that introducing numeracy to your students can be something that is not all about right answers, and not just are we making our students feel more comfortable interacting with math, but it's part of us feeling comfortable to use it with students. Thank you for being vulnerable and sharing that. This session is taped, yes. I'm not sure how to access it if you didn't sign up, so I'm hoping that COIB can answer these kinds of questions, but perhaps you can share your access. All right, I know I saw a question early on that I wanted to address later on. I also knew I might not remember. If you don't mind asking it again, I know I haven't answered it. Now I see I need to monitor not just the chat. Yes, I will put up the websites again right now and answer that other question. So it wasn't this slide though, it was. Come on, click here. These were the resources. So that's up again. Okay, so as far as motivation and encouraging goes, this was asked when we had up the at or below level 1 when we were looking at the PIAC research. I think it's motivating for students to feel like they can participate in something that they previously felt locked out of. So the fact that something is student-led and is not full of right answers, but ways to learn something and make a decision, I think is motivating to somebody who has struggled with math. So that's one of the things that I like about the numeracy routines. I don't think that math has to always be set in a context, for it to be motivating for adults. I think it can be something that is like a puzzle that we all want to solve, like logic and other puzzles that we feel like are attainable for us. So just a random thought, tangrams is an example. You can take a set of tangrams and ask students to make a square. And it's not a quick thing for me anyway. I have had students do it more quickly. It's not a quick thing. It takes persistence. And if we give our students opportunities to build more and more persistence and have more and more positive interactions with math, I think that's helpful. Ask me a different day and I'd just rattle about something else, but that's some ideas for right now. All right. Well, as you can see, we have reached the end of our session. There was supposed to be a poll, but I'm not hearing anything. It might be that of what time it is. Oh, here's our poll. Tammy, could you explain what you meant about the other websites? Are you talking about like the contact information like this? Or possibly it was the PX, so if we drop that in. But follow up if I didn't answer it. Okay. You are free to go after you take the poll, but I will stay on until everybody drops off so that if you have a question and you'd rather ask it in a smaller crowd, that you can go ahead and ask it. I'm excited about the feedback from people that are not math teachers. Thank you very much. I'm glad it gives you another way of looking at including some numeracy. Try support@coabe.org to ask about certificates.
Hi, Connie. I thought I heard a question about a certificate in here, so I thought I would jump in.
They wanted to know where to see the recording if they want to share it with somebody who did not sign up. And another question was about how do they get a certificate of attendance?
Good question. So the certificate of attendance will be emailed out to all of the participants. I think it's within 24 hours of the completion of this. So you'll get that in your email. This whole presentation, along with the materials, will be posted to coabe.org within 24 hours as well. That link, you have to be a COABE member and you have to register, but you can certainly share it with other COABE members and they can access it that way. So everything will be up and ready to go, and the certificates in your hands within 24 hours of the conclusion of this. Hopefully that answers everything. That was a great presentation. I want to thank you, and I want to thank everybody who jumped on today and participated. I hope everybody has a good rest of the week, good rest of the day, and we'll see you on our next webinar. Thanks.
Thanks. I do see the question that I don't quite get. Jay, can you explain what you mean about adult labels 1, 2, 3 based on what? Are you referring to the NRS levels? Oh, that must be the PIAC research. I'm going to show you on the map. This describes how they decided. Oh, a question just came through about where's the poll.
I closed the poll already.
Okay.
I usually let it run for about a minute.
Okay. You didn't miss a lot with the poll. It was just one question about whether this met your expectations or not. So Jay, the question about PIAC levels, I think, at or below level 1, level 2, and level 3, all the descriptions are here if you hover over, and you can do the same thing with numeracy. The same thing with literacy, I meant to say. James, do you see the
Question from Janice?
yes.
I do. The webinars and the recordings of the webinars after are for COABE members only. So when you if you were to send this link to somebody, they would have to actually enter in their COABE ID in order to access it. So these webinars are a benefit of being a member of COABE.
Okay. And I see that Yadira has her hand raised. I don't think I have a way to unmute you. And I see 2 people have a hand raised.
So we're actually at the top of the hour. It depends on how long you want to stay on, Connie.
Okay. I was just waiting for people to drop out because we're still getting questions. David, those are not CASAS goals scores, no, even though they have similar numbers. These are based on PIAC's own test. So this was not just given in the United States, this was given in many countries. I can't speak clearly about which ones anymore. I've forgotten. And so this is their own research. So this was their own scoring system. I think if you click, yes, if you click from the link that I sent you, if you click in the top left corner, it will bring you out to look at more information about this whole assessment. All right. I don't think I've missed any more questions. I just rechecked the Q&A. You're welcome, David. But I'll just give it 1 more minute to make sure I've got all your questions.
Excellent participation.
Yeah, the chat was really active. I definitely was not able to keep up on some of the slides. So I'm going to check my spelling and anything I was typing live and clean that up. I'll turn the slides into a PDF and send them. I think it was Bethel. I can't remember, Mariah.
Right. Yep.
Yeah, I'm supposed to send them to. And I'll do that as soon as we're done here. Okay. It looks like we've answered all the questions. So
yeah, I think we're all set.
Go ahead and wrap up.
All right, great. Thank you, Connie. Thank you, everybody. Have a great day.
Thank you. You too.
Bye-bye.
Bye.